Welcome to the Solid Verbal. And now, Dan and Ty.
Dan Rubenstein, welcome back from the long holiday weekend. We have much to discuss here on this last episode of the month of May, my good friend. How goes it?
It's good. Are we discussing Dollar Dog Day at American Family Field in Milwaukee? It was an incredible experience. Memorial Day, we had a flyover, 2 choppers. We had dollar dogs. We had the helmet soft serve tie.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It was. I posted this. It wasn't a college football game, but a baseball game in May when the sun is shining in Milwaukee is about as close to a college football game as you can get in May. And beautiful. I went. It was great.
Absolutely beautiful. Well, look, wherever it is that you find us today, hope you had a good holiday weekend. If you were celebrating Memorial Day out and about amongst the people, or just hanging out at home, thank you for stopping on back here. This is a 1-episode week for us. We took the holiday to ourselves as well to get a little R&R, but we are back, and yes, there is a lot going on in and around the world of college football. I will caution our dear verballers, if this businessy, administrative type stuff is not for you, either plug your ears and hit play so that we get the download.
Of course.
Or feel free to move about and carry on with your life. But regardless, if you care about college football, if you've been following college football in the media at all over the last week and a half or so, you will note that there are a few interesting points of contention that have been circulated about. We figured, well, we got to dive in today. We got to talk about it. We're a college football show, Dan. We have no choice to talk about what is going on with the Big Ten and the SEC and the other conferences, and yes, of course, the college football playoff.
We have no choice, Ty, but to keep rolling.
We just keep on rolling.
We just have to, Ty. Just like Fred Durst and DMX decided amongst themselves, we have to keep on rolling.
Hit follow, hit subscribe so that you don't miss any of our episodes. Of course, verballers.com is where you can go for the ad-free content, the bonus content. We are recording this on Wednesday, the 28th. We've got our board meeting this evening.
Yeah.
With the folks that won on the board. Yeah, it'll be good. We'll talk some shop with the verballers that were lucky enough to finish top that standings. Okay.
Give me some context, Ty. Hey, real quick, it'd be great if you could consider subscribing to the YouTube channel down below. It really helps us out.
Let's dive in. I need to save my voice, so I'm not going to scream. Also, I didn't sleep last night. Have you ever had this thing where there's a fox outside screaming bloody murder?
No, I have not.
Never?
No, not a lot of foxes. I've seen foxes around here, but not a lot of foxes whining into the wee hours of the night here.
We got one in the neighborhood here that apparently just had kits. Mm-hmm. Kits is what they call the small baby fox. Anyway, it sounded like it was in the house, and it was screaming at 11:30 last night. And then again at 4 this morning. I've been up at 4 or since 4 this morning, worried that the fox somehow found a way into the house. It must be nearby here. It was reverberating through. The dogs were up. It was a whole rigmarole.
Can I ask you, is this just a long con to do a really nice transition and segue into something about Fox Sports? Because if it is, bravo. We talking Tony Petitti? Are we doing some sort of like Ohio State, Texas? Fox offered to move the game to Sunday night, but Texas said nay. Is that the transition here, or is it actual Fox?
It's funny that you should mention this, Dan. Actually,
speaking of Fox, Dan.
Speaking of foxes, so the Big Ten had their spring meetings last week, and part of what came out of that meeting was support for a new playoff system, which we will detail here in just a little bit. Well, now, over Memorial Day weekend, as is tradition, the SEC kicks off their annual spring meetings. They do it down in Destin, Florida. You may have been out on social media over the last few days and noticed that these comments specifically on Monday evening from Greg Sankey have, let's say, animated football's media class.
Sure.
It's been a certifiable take quake out there, Dan Rubenstein. Hopefully, the goal of this episode is to offer some context so that you know what the hell's going on, because there's a lot going on. Like, if you haven't been paying attention the way we have, there's a pretty good chance you're stepping into this like you're stepping into Severance Season 2 midway through. What the hell is going on? We're going to do our best here to try and give you some context, and then, of course, offer our opinions.
Speaking of severance, could the Big Ten and SEC sever ties with the rest of college football? Hit us up on the Dave Davis hotline.
We'll get there, unfortunately. We will get there. So first, all due credit to Ross Dellinger, our friend from Yahoo. He has done an excellent job reporting out this story, really setting the stage. I thought he did a great job of that. Pat Forty did an awesome job. There are a bunch of folks that are doing good work.
Ralph Russo was in the midst. Yeah.
Ralph and Heather Dinich and Pete Thamel, like a lot. There are a bunch of people that are covering this because I think they all realize that this is significant, what's going on. In short, this used to be a golf and beach weekend for the SEC bigwigs, excuse me.
Yeah.
And now it's turned into an actual work trip, a real work trip where they're talking about things like policy and the future of the sport. We've been on those kinds of work trips, Dan. They suck. Nobody wants to go on those. You want to go for the golf and the beach. You don't want to go for the policy discussion.
Right.
That is where the SEC finds itself now. Perhaps that's why Greg Sankey did seem a little bit grumpy when he spoke to the media for about 45 minutes on Monday evening, detailing what is all going on here.
Greg Sankey is the phrase "per my last email" in human form right now. Just constantly, guys, what we're trying to do here, as I said before,
That's
the
right.
SEC schedule. If you look at the analytics, I don't know why he's turning into Richard Nixon, but that's where he is. He is very animated. He is worked up, and he is obviously the face and voice, especially since Nick Saban is no longer a head coach. You know, Kirby Smart has issued quotes about, you know, the SEC championship, and he'll go along with whatever, and, you know, these different options with the competitive options that the SEC and college football as a whole might have moving forward, as everybody's discussing various options about how do we find 16 teams? What do we do about...
By the way, 16. People might be hearing this say, wait, 16? I thought it was 12. I thought it was going to be 14.
Up to 14.
Yeah, things happen quickly in this world. There is a lot of meat on this bone. We will do our best. I will do my best. I've been immersed in this now for 36 straight hours. I'm going to try as best I can to summarize everything that has happened fairly.
Okay.
I am certain I'm going to miss some stuff. Feel free to let me know, solidverbal@gmail.com or the comments or whatever, social media. Don't be a dick about it, though. I'm trying my best here. There's a lot going on.
If you have your own very specific solution to the postseason and how everything should be laid out and decided, Ty's personal cell phone number, 610.
Yeah. No, I would love to hear it. I would, actually.
Oh, man. We've gotten
not on my cell phone.
300 of those emails? Yeah.
Not on my cell phone.
Okay.
solidverbal@gmail.com is a perfect landing spot for that.
Where are we beginning?
The overarching theme here is that despite all the change that the sport has had over the last, let's say, 5 years or so, there is more coming, and there is very real concern that it could damage the sport.
Yeah.
Some of those changes are coming via court orders, which we've discussed before. I'll bring up here momentarily. Others are coming seemingly because of the SEC and the Big Ten and where they want to take things. So for starters, we had a show with Matt Brown a couple weeks back. You may have heard of the House settlement. TLDR, schools are going to start sharing revenue with players.
Yes.
They're going to start sharing revenue with players starting, it seems, in July, as Ross Dellinger pointed out. They've been reporting on this for a while now. This is an enormous pressure point for schools around the country since suddenly they got to shell out millions of dollars, mostly to football and basketball players.
It's their choice. It's the choice of the schools how they distribute the money and how smoothly or not so smoothly that works with existing collectives and other means of trying to skirt the actual spirit of NIL. Yeah.
Absolutely. And to that point, what I would say is for anybody who's ever worked in a business, any money going out the door, any of the out-of-pocket expenses, does get a little bit more scrutiny. And it's a little bit tougher to justify. It's a little bit tougher to put a process in place to figure out how exactly we're going to issue these checks. This is new for a lot of these schools. This is suddenly going to be a lot of money going out the door for schools that I think, want to compete at this level. So clearly there is a huge movement afoot to try and put a system in place to help regulate it. But it's kind of an open secret at this point that the big money programs have already come up with ways to circumvent the rules.
Sure.
And I talked about it on the show. I talked about it with you. But like a month ago, I talked to a friend for like an hour, who gave me all the ways that he's heard of that the bigger schools are exploiting loopholes. They're cooking up a little scheme here, Dan.
Yeah.
This is what they do. They've been doing this forever. They're going to do it now. The concern is that even though they're setting up this new clearinghouse that's going to regulate things, they're just going to get sued into oblivion, let's say. Just like the NCAA did. Ultimately, there's a concern that they could be toothless in trying to rein this new world in. That's one thing. Let's take that. Let's put it to the side. The topic, though, that has really stirred up folks is the shape of the offseason. Whatever your biggest fear about this sport is, this topic's got a little something for you. A little something for you, whether it's the Big Ten and the SEC just steamrolling the rest of the sport, whether it's scheduling changes, the end of conference championship games as we know them, Congress getting involved, TV executives getting more involved, private equity, the death of the NCAA, maybe just more takes polluting your timeline.
No more Notre Dame, USC, potentially.
Yeah. I don't know what does it for you, what really gets the blood pumping, but this has a little bit of all of that.
Sure.
The first thing here is that they're already talking about expanding to 16 teams. Now, we thought it'd be 14. It sounds like more teams are gaining traction. Why do you think that is, Dan? Just out of curiosity. Why do you think they might want more teams? Just
spitballing here. Cash? Sweet cash? Get more of the cash for the people who never want to be left out ever, no matter how their season goes? Could that be
something
it?
like that.
Okay.
Something like that. So we just got to 12. They already decided, and they did this last year, that they were going to go to 14 starting in 2026 as part of a new arrangement with ESPN. But now it seems as though Big Ten, SEC have decided, maybe 16. Maybe 16 works. And the point of contention around 16 is the model that they're going to use to determine who gets in and who doesn't.
Right.
Last week at the Big Ten's meeting, they threw their support behind what they're calling a 4-4-2-2-1-3 model. You got that?
Pitched by, this is the brainchild, reportedly, allegedly, of Tony Petitti. Former TV executive. Yeah.
2-2-1-3. As if this damn sport wasn't complicated enough. That's 4 automatic bids for the Big Ten and the SEC, 2 each automatic bids for the ACC and the Big 12, 1 to the highest ranked group of 5 champion, or group of 6 champion, I should say now, and then 3 at-large bids. Got it?
Yeah.
So this came out, and everyone wants to know, with the SEC meetings going on, where is Greg Sankey on this? He's suddenly maybe the most powerful guy in the entire sport. Greg Sankey didn't really push back on it. He didn't throw his support behind it. He says he's open to ideas. He wants more ideas. He seemed to take some umbrage at the fact that maybe he's a villain in this conversation. He did say that he was reserving judgment because there was potential that it could be selling the SEC short, costing them playoff spots depending on the year.
Right.
Another quirk with this idea that has since come up is the SEC and the Big Ten are now also looking to add more games to their championship week. Okay? This is why I'm saying we need to do this whole contextual thing.
Give people a second to get their legal pads out.
Yes.
Start taking notes. Maybe a whiteboard. Maybe have a friend listen in so you can both confirm after the fact. Yes, whatever you need to do.
Whatever you need. I am trying as best I can to simplify and oversimplify this. Yeah. I've got a huge sheet of notes here that I went through several times trying to really refine it down to make it less complicated. But it's still clear as mud, okay?
Yeah.
They want to add games to championship week. So their thinking is that.
Well, first of all, there was no such thing as championship week for a conference before. That's just a new term you've brought. There's championship weekend. Right. Championship week is like what happens when you're deciding who's going to win the Atlantic 10. That's a championship week. Yeah.
Sure. Whatever the nomenclature is, you know what I mean. Yeah. That weekend where they typically play the conference championship games, they want to add more games. And they would do it under this format because they would create play-in games.
Sure.
Who's asking for play-in games? It's not me. It's not you. I guess it's them because they get 2 more games of inventory that they can sell to their network partners.
Yeah.
Okay. So what this would entail is, yes, the 1 and 2 teams would, so number 1 and number 2 teams in the SEC and the Big Ten, yes, they would still play for the conference championship. But in this world in which they have 4 automatic bids, let's introduce a little like a spirit of competition to this. They don't want the competition otherwise, but let's inject some competition into this whole rigmarole.
Yeah.
By having playing games. So we'll have the number 3 team and the number 6 team play with the winner getting the auto bid. Let's also have the number 4 team play the number 5 team with that winner getting the auto bid. By the way, the losers could still qualify via the at-large spots that come a little bit later on in this discussion, but let's just have a grand old time. This is where we're at.
Yeah. So much better than the BCS, everybody. So much better. Continue.
4-4-2-2-1-3. It's like a really bad soccer tactic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So now, notably, Greg Sankey's been talking to.
Well,
his
what was the
membership.
reaction last week before SEC? Do you want to go there?
Sure.
Let's keep it sort of chronological. The reaction to, and Greg Sankey hasn't endorsed it, but he said he's intrigued by it, something like that, right?
Yeah, he's got to play both sides. You know, I mean, that's
right.
That's what he's getting paid to do. Greg Sankey's not the villain. I don't think Greg Sankey's just doing a job. He's the kind of the figurehead of the most powerful conference, or one of the 2 most powerful conferences in college football. He's got a job to do. Everyone understands what that job is. No one should be surprised by him being the biggest SEC rah-rah in the room. Okay, so just kind of leave it there. But
it's once again Tim Cook deciding how to award Phone of the Year.
That's exactly
Through what
right.
means should we figure out how to award the one true smartphone of the year? Tim Cook here. I've got some ideas.
That's exactly right. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, yes, before I go on to where Greg Sankey took this part next,
Yes.
why don't you discuss a little bit about the reaction to that news of the Big Ten supposedly throwing its support behind the 4-4-2-2-1-3 model?
Well, initially, right, that there was, when it was going to be 14 teams, it was going to be auto bids that were going to be, I'm trying to do math on the fly here, Ty, help me out here. So it was going to be 4-4-2-2 ACC and Big 12. So that gets us to 12, and then 1 G5 and 1 at-large.
I believe so, yeah.
Right? Which would all but guarantee Notre Dame, if they were to get to that like 10-win level, be Notre Dame.
That's right.
So 4-4-2-2-1 Notre Dame. And so I think a lot of the blowback, I saw our friend Stu Mandel talk about this, was that it was anti-competitive. That in so many years, if you look at the data and where a top 14 would be, or a top 16 in this scenario that, you know, the SEC has talked about, that so many years that you wouldn't need to get it in writing, that the SEC, per the rankings, would get at least 4 teams into a 14 or 16 team playoff. That it's anti-competitive. You take things off of the field. You are sort of you're sort of saving spots for conferences, no matter what the play is or is not, all in the name of protecting against what happened to Alabama last year.
Yeah.
That they got jumped by the format because of the auto bids of, you know, a team like Clemson or SMU getting a bid, and Alabama at 9-3 being left out.
I saw our friend Mike Golick Jr. had a pretty funny post out on social media.
Yeah.
Wondering out loud whether Alabama being left out was really worth sending 1,000 ships.
Right.
You know, if that is truly the impetus
the 2024 Bama. Yeah.
If that is truly the impetus for all this, and I don't believe it's solely the motivation behind it, but I do think it's insult to injury on the SEC side.
Right.
Something that they could lean on and point to as some way they've been wronged, I guess, by the current system.
Yeah. So that, I think that was the general reaction, that the people that seem to be, you know, whether it's fans, whether it's media, that seem to be flummoxed by the idea or flabbergasted by the idea that you would have what amounts to an invitational where you save spots for conferences because those conferences happen to have the most appealing TV teams, is anti-competitive. That, there are some years in which the Big Ten might have 6 incredible teams who are ranked in the top 14 or 16 or whatever. Some years where the SEC might. Some years where the ACC or Big 12 have like 3 clear giants, right? That it's entirely possible that we would have an ACC that features an incredible Louisville, Miami, Clemson, or something like that. That all of those teams are really good. They beat up on each other. We saw it, 2008 with the Big 12 with, again, different conference, but it was Texas, Texas Tech, and Oklahoma. Right, that you would have these monsters and that you're leaving somebody out just to protect the feelings of the conferences that have the biggest quote-unquote brands. And so that seemed to be the pushback on the idea of automatic qualifying to protect the feelings of those conferences.
It does seem as though the SEC really wants to go to 9 conference games, but in addition to that, they've layered on this whole play-in game thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they've also started talking a little bit more openly about, maybe not directly referencing the Alabama situation from last season, but how maybe they don't trust the committee.
Well, and they don't trust the idea. This is Greg Sankey's words, and I'm paraphrasing, but it's what he was talking about, that he doesn't trust how strength of schedule is utilized by the committee, even though Indiana was behind teams that had more losses, and SMU was like, it was sort of talking out of both sides of his mouth, but whatever. Continue.
So now, notably, we're kicking off the SEC spring meetings.
Yeah.
There was a report that came out, I believe, just this morning via ESPN, Heather Dinich, Pete Thamel, that Greg Sankey talked this one through with the coaches, and the coaches are against it. The coaches don't really like this idea.
They come at it from a more competitive standpoint. Yeah.
They do, which call me crazy, but that's sort of my thought too. I don't like the idea of it being an invitational.
Right.
I would prefer that if we're going to have a playoff to determine a champion, that there actually be some competitive element to it. How we get the teams in there, I have some thoughts on that. We'll get to that a little bit later.
By the way, when I was looking at the idea of it being a quote-unquote invitational, I had to look up, and it made me even more confused, how Ryder Cup teams are selected.
Yes.
Because, so the Ryder Cup is once every 2 years. It's important in the golf world, but it's not the Masters, right?
No.
It's not the Open Championships or the U.S. Open or the PGA Championship, but it's an important thing.
It's a very big deal in the golf world.
It's a very big deal, and the other year it's the President's Cup, right?
Correct.
And so there are 6 golfers who automatically qualify, and you get a point per $1,000 won and 2 points per $1,000 won at majors. And then the captain so there's 6 players who get in automatically for the United States or for Europe. It's Europe or the world Ryder Cup.
Right. It's U.S. versus
Europe.
Yeah.
Right. And then the captain then says, I've got 6 captain's picks. And, whether it's somebody that I just feel like is good for this format, or I feel like is, shows a lot of potential, or good for the course. And it's an invitational.
It's an invitation.
And that's okay. It's fun. It's cool. But, you got to call Ryder Cup what it is.
I think the one thing we can all agree on, for those of us who follow college football and golf, is that we do not want Zach Johnson picking our college football teams for the next tournament. Okay.
And if you happen to be...
He is out. He is not involved in this, thankfully.
If you happen to be Boise State, or give me, Adam Scott's from South Africa.
Adam Scott's from Australia.
Oh, he's from Australia. Sorry, Adam Scott. Ryder Cup is not happening for you.
Not happening. All right. Shall we move on?
Let's move on.
Greg Sankey talks to the coaches. Apparently the coaches come at it from more of a competitive standpoint. This does seem to be more of the preference among the athletic director class. I saw there were some quotes from Trev Alberts and others, Scott Strickland, some of the names that we've come to know that run athletic departments in the SEC. This is something that they would prefer.
Yeah.
Notably, though, as you might expect, the ACC, the Big 12, Notre Dame are all vehemently opposed to the 4-4-2-2-1-3 approach.
Right.
Their more, I would add, widely accepted model is what we're calling the 5+11 model,
which has subsequently come out in the last 48 hours. Yeah.
That has come out in the last 48 hours. It is not unlike what we have now. You get the 5 highest ranked conference champions getting in. The other 11 are at large bids. Now, Greg Sankey, for his part, is not necessarily against this one either. He has said that it is very much part of the conversation.
Open to ideas. His comments definitely suggest that he's in favor of a model that has some flexibility to it. Right.
And the issue that the SEC seemingly has with the 5+11 model, again, hopefully you got the legal pads so that you can keep track of all this crap.
5+11 would be the 5 highest ranked conference champions plus 11 at-large teams.
You got it. Beautiful.
Okay.
His issue is how the committee would pick those 11 teams.
Right.
I'll get to this in a second. But
Of course.
this would, per some of their own statements, prevent them from going to 9 conference games, seemingly because they're afraid of being penalized for playing more games against better teams.
Yeah.
And also, it would prevent them from having their little conference week-a-palooza with the play-in games.
Yeah.
They really want that for some reason. I don't know where
Yeah.
that came from. I'm assuming it's a TV inventory thing, but like, who is asking for the play-in games?
It's just, it's inventory.
That's like a whole other thing.
Because otherwise you would just have to decide numbers 3 and 4 via convoluted tiebreakers, which
That's right.
You did hit about 726 in your explanations of the conference tiebreakers. I guess it was the Big 12 one. Which
the Big 12
really,
is the one that got me. There was that one, and it didn't end up coming to fruition anyway.
Right.
But before I even knew that there was a website, by the way, that tracked all this stuff,
Mm-hmm.
I had the abacus out, the slide rule. I was figuring this out on my own legal pad.
Yeah.
I had notes and notes and notes on this thing trying to figure it out.
Uh-huh.
I came pretty damn close.
Yeah.
This is what we get when they get rid of divisions. But again, another conversation.
Sure.
Anyway, back to this whole thing. Yes, there are some reservations with the 5+11 model, but that is the preference among the other conferences and seemingly now the other coaches in the SEC.
Right.
Got these 2 ideas.
Right.
The 4-4, you know what I mean. The 4-4-2-2-1-3 versus the 5+11.
Yeah.
Which brings us to Greg Sankey's comments on Monday night.
Yes.
As our good friend Andy Staples from over on 3 of the Andy and Ari show said, it is the most pissed off he has seen Sankey in public. Greg Sankey took issue with any accusation that the SEC is not acting for the good of the game, Dan.
Of course.
Said, hey, we didn't have to agree to a 12-team playoff. We would have had 2 of the 4 in the old model.
Got real lucky that Texas entered the SEC when they did.
Got real lucky.
Yeah.
Got real lucky. Needed that new team to get in there to get fresh blood. Fair enough. We didn't have to do this. We did that for the betterment of the game. Said that regular season scheduling, quote, regular season scheduling is governed by college football playoff selection. It's clear that not losing becomes more important than basically scheduling quality opponents. Okay,
Yeah.
Greg?
Which we always have to let the schools schedule their own schedule, right? How could you even think about centralizing scheduling for the college football season? That would be crazy and like literally every other sport that exists.
Nobody has ever cracked that nut of centralized scheduling.
No.
Nobody. No professional league, nobody's ever done that.
Yeah.
And then he also indicated that there is some support within his membership, and this was the big headline.
Mm-hmm.
There was some support within his membership to break away from the NCAA entirely.
Sure.
So that raised eyebrows. Ross Dellinger also reported that at the Big Ten meetings last week, the membership, quote, swung its support for bifurcating football governance, TLDR breaking away.
I'm open to listening to that. I mean, college football is not other college sports in the way that it's governed, in the way that the postseason may or may not work, and it's grown into this monstrous, huge national sport. So in the way that college basketball, men's and women's, has the tournament, and there are a select number of teams where it's a huge deal, but it's not a weekly holiday like college football is. And so it is just different, for better or worse.
I'm not necessarily opposed to that either.
Right.
I just don't want them running it.
Right.
That's my issue with it, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I think I got pretty much everything. The reason that all of this is coming to a head right now is because there is a hard deadline of December 1st because of contracts and agreements and just scheduling, right? There's a lot that needs to be settled by December 1st in order to make sure that everything is set up and good to go for future seasons. They have to figure out amongst themselves what model they're going to go with here.
Right. It's all because the TV deal is up for the playoffs.
That's right. That's right. So
years.
they need to know this. It's out of respect for their own scheduling practices. ESPN, their partner in this venture with respect to the playoff, they need to know. They need to start planning out these things in advance. They have a hard deadline of December the 1st.
Well, then TNT needs to know. Adam Lefkoe needs to make his vacation plans. Everybody's got questions.
Hopefully they don't send Adam Lefkoe Beaver Stadium again. That was brutal. Those guys were freezing.
You know what,
their asses
though?
off.
They were freezing, but that was the most new playoff game that we could have anticipated. Between the weather, between ESPN sub-licensing that game to a full other network that doesn't ever broadcast college football on that level.
Hold on. That did a pregame show, but no halftime, no postgame show.
Correct.
And no pregame show, halftime show, or postgame show for the second game.
Yeah.
All they had was a pregame show, full stop. Then it was the rest went right to ESPN.
Yeah, I think they ordered the appetizer. The calamari gave them gas, and they had to go.
It just was Kevin Nagandi at halftime and then moving forward.
Yeah, he in like a little bit of a Garth move. Like, it was nice to see. I think that game also included like an SMU charter being rerouted somewhere and Craig James being late for the game or something like that.
I think it was Craig James and Bryson DeChambeau were on like a bus coming from Williamsport or something.
Which, sidebar, that was one of my like weird little concerns about the expanded playoff and host sites being colleges in weird places and having weird airport situations. And I used the example of Penn State, and it immediately happened in year one. Pretty happy about that.
Speaking of batting 726, hello.
Yeah, thank you very much. Anyway, so yes, this is all happening now for that specific reason. And Greg Sankey, the way I listened to him was that, and I'm trying to sort of understand where everybody's coming from before really planting a flag about how I feel, because I have no idea how I feel, because there's 17 different options that you can attach your feelings to.
Yeah, this is like a Cheesecake Factory menu at this point. There's so many different ways you can go with this thing.
And it's all sort of being floated publicly to assess how people are feeling about different options and sort of gauging response. It seems to me that when you listen to Greg Sankey, he is in the middle of a Venn diagram between minimizing how villainous he and the SEC appear to be to everybody else, while also recognizing that any postseason that isn't dominated by SEC presence, that's CE, is going to be looked down upon by somebody representing somebody at one of the member schools or many member schools. That there is like this country club feel to it, that any playoff that we are not dominating is not a true playoff. And I don't know if it was just because there was a single year in which the SEC was not the story. And behind the scenes, people within the conference and people running schools said, never again will there be a playoff in which we don't have 3 of 4 semifinalists, or we don't have the overwhelming majority of teams, or we're not the story. And we got a sample size of 1 year before it seems the SEC is trying to balance the anti-villainy, anti-feeling left out of the narrative conversation. And that was the vibe I got from Greg Sankey, who we've seen these past few years. If there's anything anybody related to college football doesn't want to be, they don't want to be the object of people's fingers, for lack of a better term. I understand how uncomfortable that made everybody sound.
It's odd construction, but I got it.
Thank you. You don't want to be seen as the villain. The Big Ten does not want to be seen as the villain. Fox Sports and ESPN don't want to be seen as the villains. As easy it is to defend the fact that those 4 entities, which are all in bed together, ESPN, Fox, the SEC, and the Big Ten, are being labeled as villains. And so Greg Sankey has taken to explaining himself and explaining the SEC and their perspective and where they're coming from and why they feel like, he even said like the automatic qualifying thing could be disadvantageous. Is that a word? Disadvantaged? Whatever. It's a disadvantage potentially for the SEC,
and he's right,
to
by the
limit
way.
them
He's
to
right.
4 teams.
He is right.
He is not wrong.
I went through. I looked at. I can talk about that too, but he's not wrong in that assumption. I mean, there is possibility for that. It would have happened last year, actually.
Right. And that's fine. And the idea, though, that last year is seen as a tragedy for the SEC because of how it unfolded, I just think it's 1 year. Like, we had, 10, 11 years of a 4-team playoff to see how it would all shake out. We had however many years. It was like 98 to 2013 of the BCS. And yes, there were various attempts at various postseason options before that with like the Bowl Alliance. But some of them, it now seems like, 10 years of the 4-team playoff seem like a long time. And it changed the way that committees thought about things, and the committee members changed every so often. But Greg Sankey up on the podium, on a certain level, I understand where he's coming from, right? Who he's representing, the points he's trying to make. But I just kind of don't think he should be a part of the process at all. Neither should that's the problem when you decentralize the sport. And I just when he's talking about having 9 conference games and how that would be better for TV, and then talking about not scheduling big time non-conference games because it would be an easier path, like the USC model of like, these games are too hard. I don't want to. I'd like to hear him talk about the 9-game thing, and I think everybody would want the SEC to go to 9 games. I think it was a little bit disingenuous talking about how it's so much harder in the SEC, and we should be given a mulligan for going 9-3 because it's so much harder, while also accepting the money that goes along with being in the SEC. Any of these teams could leave because it's too hard to get to the postseason from the SEC. I haven't heard a lot of stories about teams mulling, severing ties with the SEC because there's an easier path in the ACC or the Big 12. And so,
sure,
if it's so hard, go to 6. Go to 6 games.
Yeah,
go
exactly.
to 5 games.
I mean, so I think we did a pretty good job getting the context out of the way.
Yeah, I think so too.
We can take the bubble wrap off some of our thoughts here, and I think you're hitting on something.
The wrap is off.
Hitting on something that's definitely been bouncing around in my mind.
Yeah.
Like I said before, I don't necessarily think Greg Sankey's the villain. I think he is an easy one to point the fingers at. Greg Sankey historically has been pretty measured in his responses to things. He's not always the first to speak out. He's always available to kind of give a take, but he's not necessarily the easiest guy to point the fingers at, just given public comments. Mm-hmm. He's usually been pretty buttoned up in that respect. He does, however, and it's coming out, I think, a little bit more obvious now as we get a little deeper into this discussion. He does represent a group of people that seemingly are really high on their own farts.
Sure, of course.
Like, we get that it's a tough league, Greg. Anyone who watches college football would agree that this is a tough league. In my opinion, it's the best collection of good teams that we have in the sport.
I agree.
That's not even really a take, Dan.
No.
But these guys also have not shut up about this for 20 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And the irony is that the toughest league has the biggest crybabies.
Of course.
Actually, okay, I'll be more diplomatic about it.
Please.
The SEC has definitely at this point internalized the idea, the old adage, that the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Well, hold on. Is it the SEC or is it SEC media?
It's probably a little of both.
Okay. Because they have their own PR wing.
They have their own
with the ESPN.
state-funded media. Yes, they do.
Yeah.
So with that as kind of the backdrop,
mm-hmm.
I think it's fair to wonder what would actually satisfy these guys. They claim, they want to be treated fairly.
Right.
Well, unless the college football playoff is all SEC teams, they're never going to feel like they're being treated fairly.
Right.
To which I'd say, you don't need the NCAA, man. If you want to hold your own rodeo,
do it.
You don't need the NCAA for that.
By the way, the interesting thing is, if we've learned anything about these conferences and the way they interact with each other and view their own interests, right now we have a Big Ten SEC alignment because they each recognize that they have grown to a point, both in terms of the number of teams and their sphere of influence, that's unmatched in the sport.
Right.
Also,
right.
what we've learned with conferences in college football is sometimes they get along and sometimes they go their own separate ways and turn their backs on previous agreements and acknowledgments. And so I'm not so sure that the Big Ten and the SEC are going to be holding hands forever.
No, the SEC right now is very much of the mind that they keep Peter Burns close, but keep the Big Ten a little bit closer.
Sure.
Right. Let's just make sure that we're in lockstep, like we continue this symbiotic relationship for our own betterment, to some extent, maybe the betterment of the system. But everybody is out here trying to feed their own mouths.
Of course.
If you want to break away and crown your own champion because you think that your brand of football, your cast of characters is better, stronger, tougher than everybody else, then go for it. Then go for it.
Literally just 1 year where they weren't the story in the postseason and everything needs to be blown up. Yeah.
It was just 1 year. The solution I think that nobody's talking about is something you alluded to at the very top. And you did it half jokingly.
Okay.
But we've been doing this show long enough to know that, know each other's rhymes and rhythms.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the BCS.
Yeah.
Why is nobody talking about nuking the college football selection committee?
Toothpaste is out of the tube.
Like,
oh, you mean keeping the playoff big, but deciding on the teams via a
computer
mix
rankings
of, well, maybe human and rankings, whatever. Maybe the committee's part of it. Maybe a select poll.
Yeah.
You know, there's 12 committee members, there's 12 media members, and then there are 12 different computer models.
Like, why not go back to that? You know, because it seems as though
I think the PR for computers deciding things was so bad in the moment that it would be hard to recover from, as much sense as it might make.
Like, it seems that the biggest issue Greg Sankey and the group that he represents have with the college football playoff selection committee is that it's somewhat opaque how they come to their conclusions, right? We always have we have this show where we're gonna put Boom Shakalaka Corrigan in front of a camera and Reese Davis and Joey Galloway and Booger McFarland, whoever, they're gonna yell at him for a half hour.
Yeah.
And, you know, he looks like a deer in headlights. Nobody gets any answers. He contradicts himself because this isn't a perfect system. There's no perfect system.
Right.
But at least what the computer rankings would give you some semblance of is cold, hard, transparent things that you can take into account.
Yeah, yes and no, though, right? Like, you have to explain to people what computer rankings are, what they weigh, why they're so important, why they're so meaningful. Like, you are making it more convoluted that way.
Look, they're making this convoluted as is.
Of course they are.
We're talking about a 4-4-2-2-1-3 model. Come on.
Yeah.
You know, that Fibonacci sequence of a playoff setup, I would much rather go the route of, all right, here's how we're going to reward strength of schedule. Here's how we're going to reward conference strength.
Right.
Here is how we can take into account, yes, you lost to a good team, but you're not going to be fully submarined by it. Here's how we can take into account, oh, you beat that team. Here is what that stands for. Maybe it is some mix. Maybe it's a 70-30 split between the committee and who they would choose to put in and the computers and how they're grading out a team's performance. But I think if, in fact, the real issue with using the committee in a 5+11 model, whatever, is how are we arriving at those 11 at-large teams? If we can introduce some objectivity into it via computer models, that's something we should talk about.
But it runs counter to the power that the Big Ten and SEC want. That they want to determine the format, and in terms of choosing, they want to determine just how, and I guess you can program an algorithm, a formula, however you want, and whatever is the most advantageous strength of schedule measurer, that's what you include. But I don't know. I still feel like the computer experiment was a failed PR experiment, even if there is validity to its means.
There's a guy out on Twitter who has been posting the BCS rankings every year.
Yeah.
And I went back and I checked them before having this conversation. It's not that far off. You know, if this were a 16-team model, obviously Alabama would have gotten into that one. But using those computer rankings, it's not like it is viewing the sport in an entirely different way.
Right.
It's pretty damn close to what we saw last year.
Yeah. No, it is close, and there is appeal to me, but I've never been a playoff expansionist.
What would you do? What would you do? Because, like, in thinking through all of these options, the thought that kept bouncing around in my head was just keep it at 12. Like, no one's asking for the play-in games. No one's asking for more complexity in the sport. Jason Kirk, who writes...
Is this, by the way, is this all rooted... I'm sorry to interrupt. Is this all rooted in Indiana getting in?
On some level, it might be.
Because that was the illusion from Greg Sankey, and that was like the pain point narrative that first weekend.
They hated that. They hated that so much.
They hated Indiana's schedule. They hated that you were just counting losses and not taking context of like, well, actually, Alabama lost to Vanderbilt and Oklahoma last year. Like, I think, like, if you look at the whole root of everything, the closest thing I can find to why people are so upset, directly and indirectly, is Indiana having a nothing non-conference schedule and losing to the one excellent team on their schedule, beating the defending champ in Michigan for whatever that's worth, that they would have the gall to go 11-1 in the Big Ten,
right,
and be seen as, or not, they wouldn't have the gall, but that people would have the gall to look at an 11-1 team and thinking like you've completely removed all of the context, their schedule's terrible, whatever. Whereas Alabama played harder teams, but also lost to a couple of the more average teams on their schedule, and Indiana and the SEC would have gone 7-5, blah, blah, blah. But I think that's what it's rooted in, which, by the way, sidebar to the sidebar, the intent of Indiana was not to sneak into the playoff.
No, the intent of Indiana was to get a better coach and use the portal to have a better team. They didn't know it was going to be
I'm just saying the intent of how they scheduled their non-conference schedule was to get into the Pinstripe Bowl. Maybe. Right. If everything breaks right.
That's right.
We can use this schedule. And also, sidebar to the sidebar to the sidebar, this was the first year Indiana did not have to play a Big Ten East schedule. So every other year, they're playing Michigan and Ohio State and Penn State and Michigan State, and like an impossible schedule for not having the roster to compete in that specific division. They finally get out of that division, which always penciled in 4 or 5 losses onto their schedule. And they have a good team, and they win a bunch of games. And we have to blow up the entire system.
Gotta blow it up.
Because Indiana went 11-1 against their schedule and kept Alabama out. And you always talked about how, like, you know, you'd much rather have a system where we're arguing about number 13, or we're arguing about number 15, or we're arguing about number 17. It turns out when you argue about number 15, you're not actually arguing about the team. You're arguing about the rulers with which conferences measure themselves.
Yeah. Another lesson learned. Back to what I was saying here. Let me go back to this for a second. No, it's cool. I said no one's asking for playing games. No one's really asking for more complexity. If it were up to me, I'd keep it at 12. I finally got 1 year of it. Let's not change it too much. I mean, if you want to go to 14 but keep the same model, fine. It's up to these guys. I bring up Jason and the newsletter that he writes for The Athletic, does a great job. In his newsletter, he said, can we please just pick something and stick with it for a little bit?
Yeah, totally.
Can we just pick something and stick with it for a little bit?
That's the sort of point of saying, like, you had 10 years of this, 12 years of that, 15 years, and you're like, you see the unexpectedly good things that can come of it.
And you
the
make
unexpected
tweaks.
Right.
You make it better. They just fixed the seating problem. That was something that I think we learned very quickly. They just fixed that. Now they're doing the straight seating, which we talked about.
Yeah.
Just keep it at that. This is fine. This is what I would do. All right. Currently, I would just keep it the way it is for a little bit longer. Let's live with it. Let's see what other tweaks we can make down the road to make it better. Let's give ourselves the flexibility. If there need to be improvements on the fly, like with the seating, right, we can do that. Let's revisit. But I kind of like where it ended up. I'm okay with that. This is my long-winded way of asking you what you would do. What would you do after 1 year of the playoff, knowing that some of these other proposals are out there? Is there one of these other options that does it more for you? Like, where are you at?
So conference championships don't do much for me anymore. And if we're going to keep asking teams to play more and more games, like, I'm not a TV executive, so I don't care about selling Provasic inventory, Ty. And so
They switched the samples.
I got to get that sound.
You switch the samples.
I would, if we have to go to 16 teams, just rank 1 through 16 after the season and give everybody a week off and then start playing the playoff. And if you want to include a G5 team, I'm okay with that. If you want to say it's the 5 highest ranked teams, that the 5 plus 11, I'd get rid of conference championship. I'd get rid of all of the play-in garbage. I just don't think the sport is advantaged by making it more complicated. I think if you are married to the number of teams in the playoff being 16, then everybody plays 12 games. Everybody has a 9-game conference schedule. You reward teams for scheduling. If we're still going to have decentralized, everybody's scheduling on their own. You reward teams for scheduling up. You take that into account. You can rank a team that goes 10-2 above a team that goes 12-0 or 11-1, and you have enough people voting that if enough people feel that way, great, cool. And you go from there. You go from, I just have no interest in okay, this team has just played 12 games. Everybody's played 12 games. Now we need to see Oregon play Penn State. Are they both playoff teams? They're both playoff teams. Did one of them go undefeated and should be ranked higher than the other team? Yes. So what do we need? What do we need to prove with conference championship games at this point if we're divisionless across the board, basically, in this sport? I would just ditch that, rank 16 teams, bump one team out if there's a G5 team who is ranked outside of the top 16. I think there is value in including as many different regions and levels of this sport as possible in the playoff. And if, number 19 San Diego State gets in instead of number 16 TCU or Missouri or something, that's okay, because Ty Hildenbrandt said he'd rather argue about number 16.
I would.
And that's fine. And I don't think you're wrong in saying that.
I would.
In my ideal world, I think there's value if we are saying this is a competition to see who can win a national championship. I don't understand why you would go past 6 teams.
6 teams, not
Yes.
16.
I think there is, if you look at the history of the sport, I think there is value in saying there are not more than a handful of teams who legitimately have the depth and top-level talent to win a number of games in late December, early January to win the national championship, and that we are expanding this, and upon expanding it, and we're just sort of further rewarding and still getting the result that we were always going to get because we can sell more Provasic ads. I think it's counter to
samples.
And those games, those however many games, what are you going to win? 3 games? You're going to have 2 teams have a bye, and then 4 teams play the first week, and then the 2 teams who have the bye play those 2 winners. It's better to have fewer games because of the excitement of the sport. It's better to have this sport end in as early January as humanly possible because you want to capitalize on your window. What is the NFL doing? The NFL does not care about the college football playoff.
Not at all.
They will schedule a 5th Super Bowl on the day of Michigan, Ohio State if they could, right? That doesn't matter. So you need to limit how many times you can get beat down. You're diluting the appeal of the sport, all in the name of selling Provasic ads. And I would just never think to go past 6 teams if I want to find a national championship, have a little bit of scarcity so that everybody's tuning into the same thing with the same interest and not just doing things because how cool would it be to have Penn State host SMU and to have Texas Clemson, and just for the sake of it being cool, sure, it makes sense. For the sake of finding a national champion, for the sake of how I enjoy the rhythm of the sport, I just want it to be done in early January.
Yeah.
I think it's more fun to have more huge games instead of more pretty big games.
We've done this show a long time.
Yeah.
And the people who have listened for a while or even just for a week, people will know I'm not a takesman. And I'm not especially prone to getting emotional or upset about anything that happens in this world, because on some level it's all very silly. Again, nobody's in charge. The idea of the Big Ten and the SEC turning the playoffs into some kind of sham tournament absolutely enraged me.
Yeah.
When I heard about this, it enraged me to no end. Like, I go back 15 years of wanting a 16-team playoff. I've talked about it often here on this show, the old Dan Wetzel model, where every conference champ gets in. There are a few at-large teams, sort of like the NCAA basketball tournament, but smaller, obviously much smaller.
Mm-hmm.
My thought was always that if they are all playing in the same division, if we are going to continue this charade, then everybody should have a shot at the same trophy. I don't think that's an illogical conclusion, Dan.
It's just not the world in which we live.
That idea, that possibility, I think, officially flatlined when things became more about finding TV money and less about finding an actual champion.
Sure.
So we finally get 1 year of 12. They're already trying to turn it into a showcase event for TV, as you've said time and again.
Mm-hmm.
If it were up to me, yeah, I'd keep it at 12. Just keep it where it's at because no one's asking for these other things. But then, okay, they want to go to 14. Now apparently to 16. Not because anything's broken, but because enough power conference teams are just not getting a piece of that sweet, sweet cash.
Or their piece isn't big enough. And they're
Or
going
it's
to have
not big enough.
Look, athletic budgets are changing because of revenue sharing. And so you are looking under as many couch cushions as possible to balance your athletic department budget and to, put away as much as you can for a rainy day. And I understand why college football is seen as a cash grab given the evolution of the sports finances. I get it.
If they are going to go to 16,
Yeah.
then I'm on board with the 5+11 model. Some tweaks maybe to how the committee picks teams to keep everybody satisfied.
Mhm.
You can incorporate some modicum of computer formulas to make it more objective or seemingly more objective. I'm okay with that too. Look, the way that they decide teams, as I said earlier, it's been opaque. Often it's a moving target. Often whatever sacrificial lamb they put in front of the camera contradicts himself, herself in the same sentence.
Yeah.
It's an impossible situation to be in. I hate that. I don't get anything out of that. I don't even watch the damn show on Tuesdays.
Right.
It's stupid. Find some way to make it a little bit more objective, transparent. I think everybody would agree that that's a better approach to picking these teams. But do not do the thing where suddenly it's going to be this invitational. I hate that.
I do too.
Drives me absolutely crazy.
Yeah. It sucks so much of the competitive fun out of the sport that places are being held. Like the country clubification of the college football playoff. It's just the reason college football has appealed to me is how cool and unique it is. And complicating and holding spots, I don't know. It just is about as uncool and velvet ropey as it gets. And
Right.
I don't know. It just doesn't have a feel to me that I'm on board with. And I mean, look, we can bring this full circle too with like USC Notre Dame.
Ugh.
Like the USC mouthpieces are out saying like, well, things have changed. We don't need I think it was Colin Cowherd who said like 2 schools, 2 different needs. The game grows and Lincoln Riley isn't so sure why this, it's a great tradition. But like, and then I saw, who else did I see? Like Petros Papadakis saying like, who is Lincoln Riley in the grand scheme of things? What does he know? I love all of this. I don't think there's any way. Call me cynical, Ty. I don't think there's any way USC, name me a school that has been more dictated by conference television these last few years.
Yeah.
Like they're basically an affiliate of Fox at this point. You think Fox and NBC and CBS are going to let USC walk away from having Notre Dame on their air? You think that's ever going to happen? I mean, Lincoln Riley may want it to happen, but that sort of further underscores like USC hasn't played a meaningful postseason game in how long? 15 years, 17 years, something like that. It's not all because USC wants to win a national championship. It's because Notre Dame, as a good team, if not a great team, is a roadblock in front of USC, preventing USC for recapturing its perceived status as being a playoff team, as being in the club, being behind the velvet ropes. Because if it were just competitive and if it were just for fun, whatever, like, of course USC is going to play Notre Dame. Notre Dame is in the way because now it's harder in the Big Ten for USC to go 10-2. It's a tougher schedule than it was in the Pac-12. And so having Notre Dame on top of it makes it more difficult for USC to finish in the top 15, 16, 14, or whatever. And it's totally status. It's totally status. USC doesn't have a roster. They won't have a roster anytime soon to compete with Georgia or Ohio State or Texas or whatever.
No.
It is just, how do we get to this point that we see ourselves as once again? And that's the whole idea of the playoff. That's the whole idea of all these teams, is you want to be in the in group. And USC, by the way, the last time USC was in the in group, their most memorable win, Ty Hildenbrandt was there.
I was there.
USC was in the in group because they had the gall to go to South Bend with the cowards at Notre Dame growing the grass long to try and stop Reggie Bush.
Dude, it was so long. You could see, I was in like one of the last rows of the stadium. You
Sure.
could see it from back there. And I joke with my friend who was a USC fan, like, did they forget to mow the lawn? They didn't forget. They did that on purpose.
And USC won the game.
They won the game. With the
USC made
push.
big play after big play. Notre Dame couldn't stop the most basic college football play, and that's okay. It happens. And USC took that huge stage and vaulted themselves once again into an even bigger stage. And I just think the idea of like shying away from competition, first of all, it's antithetical to USC. Wasn't it Pete Carroll, always compete?
Always compete.
Yeah, always competed, I guess. It's just, man, win games, play good teams, measure yourself against the best, see what happens. If you're left out, it's probably with good reason, because going 8-4 or something, 9-3, depending on who you lose to, which it should be part of it.
It should be.
It's not good enough, and that's okay. Maybe it's just not your year. But God, trying to change the rules and hold spots, it feels gross, man.
I mean, I think you know where I stand on this. Notre Dame
Yeah.
should play USC.
Of course.
Notre Dame should play USC every year. It's one of those games that always gives me agita. I'm always a little worried about it. But it's the battle for the jeweled shillelagh. You know?
Yeah.
One thing that's been floating around that I want to give voice to.
Don't join the Big Ten if you're scared of harder games.
Let me give some voice to this, because it's one of the other things that I saw online, and it's sort of been stuck in my craw ever since. There is an idea floating around that basically hand waves any of these changes or any of the alarmist reaction, let's say, to changes, because look, Saturdays are indestructible. You're going to watch anyway, you know?
Right.
Which I'd say is partially true. Like,
You're going to watch
this,
your team.
Yeah, like we had this question a couple weeks ago on one of our recent Q&A episodes. Somebody asked us that. What would it take for you to stop watching on Saturdays? And our answer was basically like, we're going to watch regardless. We do this full time.
Yeah.
But I can't even count how many messages we have gotten over the last year of people who feel very differently. Very differently. And, you know, I was thinking about this a little bit this weekend. Like, I often think back to my previous life working in corporate America, you know?
Yeah.
And the two things that I learned in that role, because I did a little bit of marketing and branding along with all the boring digital stuff, but like, one, you got to understand your killer feature. And two, you can't take anyone's loyalty for granted. Like, there are limits to that.
By the way,
You know?
catching people up that don't know about Ty's previous life, Ty used to be the secretary for the Department of the Interior.
Yes, of course.
So that he balanced that with this.
I did.
Like, kudos. Tip of the cap.
I did. But like, we all watch sports because we enjoy seeing athletic people do incredible things. But like, college football, the killer feature for college football is your emotional attachment to it.
Yeah.
The brand of college football has been that intrinsic value for like a century, whether to a team, to a player, a region, a rivalry, the friggin' sunset at the Rose Bowl. I don't know.
Right.
We have seen so much change over the last couple years. The players, the teams they play for, the conferences they play in, even the sunset at the like, all of these things have been tweaked. They are pushing the limits of what people feel loyalty to.
Sure.
And we've got the receipts of the people who have written in You're just simply out of touch if you don't think on some level that this is wearing people down or turning people off. People on our beat, like the national college football beat, I think we're especially vulnerable to it. We may not always recognize it in the moment because we see these things as an opportunity to create the content, to talk about it. That's what people are interested in, because they care about this sport. But bigger picture, if there is a change in fan sentiment, they tend to tune it out entirely. We had a guy write in yesterday say, hey, I love what you guys do. I stopped listening to the pod last year. It was just a little much for me because of all the changes.
Yeah.
I've got a million of those.
Well, isn't it also...
We got that. They either tune out entirely or they tend to collapse back into their individual team sites and message boards.
Right.
And that's actually not good for us.
No,
as a
not
business,
necessarily.
longer term. That is how people react to these types of things. So I saw that floating around, and it's, just the idea of it, not the people talking about it, but the idea of it is something that I shudder at, because I fundamentally disagree with that notion. Yes, people will still watch on Saturdays, but if you start grinding away at the emotional attachment to the sport via the playoff, via rivalries like USC Notre Dame, I think cumulatively over the span of many years, that has a lasting impact that we should not just pan and forget about and say, it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, you're not going to grow forever. People aren't loyal forever if you keep changing the product, if you keep tinkering, if you keep tweaking, if you present new reasons to evaluate teams or conferences as villainous, if you give reasons to people to tune out, or like, honestly, fandom is a spectrum that you can go from, I watch all day, I am a season ticket holder, I pay for, the parking passes, I pay to be a member of like the Arkansas Rivals site, to, I buy all this merch, I throw all these watch parties, like I travel to the bowl game, like you vote with your wallet. And you can go from, okay, now I do 8 of those 10 things. Now I do 4 of those 10 things. Now I go to 1 game a year. I used to watch games from 11 a.m. until 1 a.m. Now I watch my team and maybe a big game. And now I watch my team, and then I'm going to watch some of the big game at a bar because so-and-so is having a bachelor party and it's that weekend, and I'd rather go to Nashville than stay home in San Jose and watch this game. And I'll catch some of it in a bar, or instead of staying home and watching the game with friends, I'll watch a little bit of the game on my phone on YouTube TV while I'm at a kid's soccer game. Like, fandom is a spectrum. And if you give people reasons to pull back on their fandom or become more a la carte with their fandom, bottom lines are going to be hit. Yeah, and so if you give people those reasons or those options or those emotions, they're going to take them.
There's a lot of ways that you can occupy yourself on a Saturday, especially if you're working 40 hours a week.
Sure.
A 9 to 5, the grind of the office, sitting in a cubicle, or, out there on the road. You got people listening to us on the road. I mean, there are more than enough ways that you can keep yourself occupied when you're not at the office.
Are game day ratings up in the last 10, 12 years? Maybe. I don't know.
I mean, since they went to a 7-hour telecast in the morning, I can't imagine they are, but what do I know?
What are you consuming? And look, lives change and people get older and whatever, but where's your enthusiasm with the sport right now compared to where it was? And you hope it's the same. You hope it's grown. But if you give people reasons to see aspects of the sport as villainous, it likely won't turn out the way you're hoping.
You can't hand wave it. I don't know.
No.
I think that's a mistake. And again, I don't want people to come out of this episode thinking that Dan Rubenstein, Ty Hildenbrandt, yes, I'm referring to ourselves in the third person.
More handsome than ever.
I do want that.
Yeah.
I don't want people to think that we are out here purposely trying to portray this as a negative thing, that we don't actually root for college football. We don't. I think the problem for us is that we care too much about it. We care too much.
We just want the main thing to be the main thing.
We care too much about it. We're not telling people to tune out. We are doing our part here to keep you up to speed with what's going on.
Yeah.
And there is a lot. There's a lot going on. And I suspect from, again, the emails that we have gotten over the last couple of years, there'll be a lot of folks out there, a vocal, perhaps majority at this point of our verballerhood, that doesn't like what they're being force-fed here.
I agree.
And it would be wise of Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti and ESPN and Fox and whoever else, it'd be wise for them to take notice and not fly too close to the sun with this, because this is something a lot of people care a lot about and have voted for in the past with their wallets.
By the way, do some market research. Talk to your constituents. See why they're interested. Talk to the people.
Yeah.
Go amongst college football fans across the country, in your region, it's near your region, across the great land of ours, and see what the appeal point is and how do you maximize that. It's not all about you. It's just not.
We've done live shows, by the way. We've done live shows. We've done live chats with our people. One of the reasons we're still here doing this is because I think we have a pretty good sense for where the college football
customer
world is at.
service.
Yeah, where the verballerhood is at.
Because what happens, Ty, when you keep tinkering? I'm going to bring this another full circle moment. When you keep tinkering, Ty, I'm a tinkerer, you're a tinkerer, you end up screwing things up more than ever. And I obviously thought of the Seinfeld episode where Jerry keeps shaving just a little bit of his chest hair.
Yep.
And then it's just gone and he's crazy itchy.
And he's got the chest of bees, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Don't over tinker. That's all.
Again, I bring this full circle by saying we would...
Your turn.
We would, on that chest of bees note,
Yeah.
I would encourage people to write in solidverbal@gmail.com. Hit us up on social media, YouTube comments, Spotify comments, wherever. Let us know your thoughts on this. Are we off base? Are we on point? How would you solve the playoff conundrum that it seems we find ourselves in? Should some of these leagues break off entirely and start their own thing? We didn't even get to private equity, which is a whole other conversation. Apparently, all of the conferences are entertaining those ideas. We've already gone over an hour here. Let's make that a conversation for another day.
Yep.
I don't want to depress people too much talking about all this stuff. But alas, there's a lot of meat on the bone. As I said at the beginning of this episode, we would encourage you to weigh in and let us know your thoughts. If you made it this far, please do hit follow or subscribe so that you don't miss any of what's coming next. As we turn the corner now into June, we can start flowing a little bit more downhill towards the 2025 season. Once we get into July, we'll talk about teams, we'll talk about schedules, we'll talk about predictions, we'll talk about hopefully anything other than this. But
Correct.
We had to get this one out of the way. We just had to. It's what everyone's talking about.
Yep.
Why don't we leave it here? Good discussion today. Hope you enjoyed it.
Always.
For that guy over there, my good friend Dan Rubenstein, for myself, Ty Hildenbrandt, thank you as always for your ongoing support. We will talk to you all next week. As always, stay solid.
Peace.